There is a reason why most people cannot see clearly, not because they lack eyes, but because they lack stillness. Most people believe that seeing clearly is a function of the eyes, but the truth is that clarity has very little to do with what is in front of you and everything to do with what is happening within you. The more noise you carry inside, the less you are able to perceive reality as it is. You may look at the same situation as someone else, yet your understanding will be completely different. Not because the world changed, but because your inner state shaped what you saw. This is why stillness becomes the foundation of inner vision. Without it, everything is distorted. From a young age, you have been conditioned to stay in motion. Your attention is constantly pulled in different directions. There is always something demanding your focus. Messages, opinions, expectations, comparisons. Even when you are alone, your mind continues the noise. It replays the past, it imagines the future, it judges. In this constant movement, there is no space for clarity to exist. You are not truly seeing. You are only interpreting through layers of distraction. Stillness is uncomfortable at first because it removes all the escapes you are used to. When you sit down and do nothing, when you stop reaching for stimulation, you begin to notice how restless your mind actually is. Thoughts arise rapidly, one after another, pulling you into stories and emotions. You may feel the urge to get up, to check something, to distract yourself again. This discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that you are finally becoming aware of what was always there. If you remain in this stillness, something subtle begins to shift. You start to separate yourself from the constant stream of thoughts. Instead of being pulled into every idea or emotion, you begin to observe them. You notice how a single thought can change your mood, how a memory can create tension in your body, how anticipation can create anxiety without anything actually happening. This observation is the beginning of clarity. You are no longer completely controlled by what appears in your mind. As the practice deepens, the intensity of the noise starts to decrease. Not because you are forcing it to stop, but because you are no longer feeding it with constant reaction. Thoughts lose their power when they are not entertained. Emotions pass more quickly when they are not resisted or amplified. In this space, your mind begins to settle naturally, like water that is no longer being disturbed. In that settled state, your perception changes. You begin to notice details you previously ignored. You listen more deeply. You respond more calmly. Situations that once triggered immediate reactions now feel slower, giving you the ability to choose how you engage. This is where inner vision starts to awaken. It is not something mystical or distant. It is a refined awareness that comes from removing internal noise. Stillness also reveals truths that are often hidden beneath distraction. You begin to see your habits clearly, your patterns of thinking, your emotional tendencies. You recognize where you react out of fear, where you seek validation, where you avoid discomfort. These realizations may not always feel pleasant, but they are necessary. Without seeing clearly, there can be no real change. Over time, stillness becomes less of a practice and more of a state you carry within you. Even in the middle of activity, a part of you remains grounded and aware. You are no longer easily overwhelmed by external chaos because your inner environment is stable. This stability allows you to see beyond surface level appearances. You start to understand not just what is happening, but why it is happening. And in this quiet awareness, your vision is no longer limited to what is obvious. You begin to sense the deeper layers of reality, not through force, but through presence. Most people spend their lives trying to control their minds, believing that discipline means forcing thoughts to disappear or replacing them with more positive ones. But the mind does not work that way. The more you try to control it, the stronger it resists. It is like trying to hold water tightly in your hands. The harder you grip, the faster it slips away. This constant effort to control creates tension, and that tension becomes another layer of noise that blocks your clarity. The real shift happens when you stop trying to dominate your mind and instead learn how to observe it. Observation is not passive weakness. It is precise awareness. It is the ability to see what is happening inside you without immediately reacting to it. This is a skill that most people never develop because they are always caught in the content of their thoughts rather than aware of the process itself. When a thought appears, your usual habit is to follow it. One idea leads to another, and before you realize it, you are lost in a chain of reactions. A simple memory can turn into regret. A small concern can grow into anxiety. This happens so quickly that you rarely notice the moment when the thought first appeared. You only notice the emotion after it has already taken hold of you. Observation interrupts this automatic pattern. When you begin to observe your mind, you start noticing thoughts as they arise. You see them as events, not as commands. A thought appears, stays for a moment, and then fades. Instead of attaching yourself to it, you allow it to exist without interference. This creates a space between you and your thoughts, and in that space, you regain control, not by force, but by awareness. This does not mean that thoughts will stop. The mind produces thoughts just as the heart beats. Trying to eliminate them completely is unnecessary and unrealistic. What changes is your relationship with them. Instead of being pulled into every thought, you become the one who watches. You begin to realize that not every thought deserves your attention, and not every emotion requires a reaction. There will be moments when the mind becomes loud and persistent. Certain thoughts will try to pull you in more strongly than others, especially those connected to fear, desire, or past experiences. In these moments, the practice of observation becomes even more important. Rather than fighting these thoughts or trying to suppress them, you simply notice them with clarity. You see their intensity. You feel their presence, but you do not become them. As this awareness deepens, you begin to recognize patterns. You see how certain situations trigger specific thoughts, how certain beliefs repeat themselves, how your mind creates stories that are not always aligned with reality. This recognition is powerful because it allows you to step out of unconscious behavior. You are no longer reacting blindly. You are seeing the mechanism behind your reactions. Observation also brings a sense of calm that cannot be forced. When you are not constantly resisting your thoughts, there is less internal conflict. The mind begins to settle on its own. You may notice moments of silence between thoughts, small gaps where there is no mental noise. These gaps are important because they reveal that your awareness exists beyond the constant stream of thinking. In these moments, you experience a different kind of clarity. You are present without being distracted by internal commentary. You see things more directly without the filter of judgment or assumption. This is where true awareness begins to grow. Not from controlling the mind, but from understanding it. Over time, this practice changes how you move through life. Situations that once triggered immediate reactions now feel different. You notice the impulse to react, but you also notice that you have a choice. This choice is subtle, but it is powerful. It allows you to respond with intention instead of habit. The more you observe, the less you are controlled by what you observe. Thoughts lose their authority, emotions lose their grip, and you begin to experience a sense of inner freedom that does not depend on external conditions. Discomfort is the point where most people turn back. It is the invisible barrier that separates those who remain on the surface from those who begin to see deeper. The moment you decide to sit with yourself without distraction, without escape, you are immediately confronted by a kind of unease that feels unfamiliar and intense. This discomfort is not random. It is the accumulation of everything you have avoided, suppressed, or ignored. Your mind has been conditioned to move away from discomfort as quickly as possible. The instant something feels unpleasant, you reach for distraction. You check your phone, you seek conversation, you fill the silence with noise. This pattern becomes automatic, so much so that you rarely question it. You begin to believe that discomfort is something negative, something that must be eliminated. But in reality, discomfort is a signal. It is showing you exactly where your awareness is lacking. When you stop running and choose to stay present, the discomfort becomes clearer. You start to notice the restlessness in your body, the tension in your chest, the constant urge to do something, anything, just to avoid being still. Your thoughts may become louder, more chaotic. Old memories may resurface. Doubts and insecurities that were hidden beneath distraction begin to appear. This can feel overwhelming, and it often creates the illusion that something is wrong, but nothing is wrong. What you are experiencing is the unveiling of your internal state. The discomfort you feel is not created in that moment. It was always there, quietly influencing your actions from beneath the surface. By choosing stillness, you are simply bringing it into your awareness. This is why it feels intense, because for the first time, you are no longer avoiding it. Most people misunderstand this stage. They assume that if the mind becomes more restless, it means they are failing. In truth, it means they are finally seeing clearly. The noise was always present. Now it is just visible, and visibility is the first step toward transformation. If you remain with the discomfort without reacting, something begins to shift. At first, it may feel like nothing is changing, but slowly, your relationship with the discomfort starts to evolve. Instead of resisting it, you begin to observe it. You notice how it rises, how it moves through your body, how it eventually fades. You realize that even the most intense sensations are temporary. This realization is powerful because it breaks the illusion that discomfort controls you. You begin to see that the urge to escape is just another reaction, not a necessity. You do not have to follow it. You can stay, breathe, and watch. As you continue this practice, your tolerance for discomfort increases. Situations that once felt unbearable start to feel manageable. You develop a kind of inner strength that does not come from forcing yourself to endure, but from understanding that discomfort is not your enemy. It is a teacher. Discomfort reveals your attachments, what you cling to, what you fear losing, what you try to protect. It exposes your habits, and your patterns. It shows you where you are seeking control and where you are avoiding truth. Without discomfort, these things would remain hidden, and you would continue to act unconsciously. There is also a deeper layer to this process. When you stay with discomfort long enough, you begin to notice that it loses its sharpness. What once felt overwhelming becomes neutral. The sensations are still there, but they no longer carry the same emotional weight. This happens because you are no longer feeding them with resistance. In this space, a quiet stability begins to form. You are no longer easily shaken by internal or external disturbances. You can sit in uncertainty without panic. You can face difficult emotions without immediately trying to change them. This stability is essential for deeper awareness because it allows you to remain present even when things are not comfortable. Discomfort, then, is not something to be avoided, but something to be understood. It is the doorway that most people refuse to walk through, and yet it is the only path that leads beyond surface-level awareness. Clarity does not come from adding more to the mind. It comes from allowing the unnecessary to fall away. Most people try to think their way into understanding, believing that more analysis will lead to better perception. But the more you fill the mind with constant thinking, the more crowded it becomes. In that crowd, nothing can be seen clearly. Every thought overlaps another. Every opinion interferes with perception, and what remains is confusion disguised as activity. Mental silence is often misunderstood. It is not the complete absence of thought, nor is it a forced state where you suppress everything that arises. True silence is natural. It emerges when the mind is no longer being constantly stimulated and disturbed. It is the result of observation, patience, and non-reaction. When you stop feeding every thought with attention, the mind begins to quiet down on its own. Imagine a body of water that is constantly being stirred, no matter how clear the water is by nature. If it is always in motion, you will never be able to see through it. The surface remains disturbed, and whatever lies beneath is hidden. This is how the mind functions when it is continuously reacting. Every reaction creates another ripple, another disturbance that blocks clarity. When you begin to observe without reacting, the movement gradually slows. Thoughts still appear, but they are no longer followed, no longer amplified. Emotions arise, but they are not resisted or exaggerated. In this state, the mind starts to settle. The surface becomes calm, and as it does, something remarkable happens. You begin to see this clarity is not something you create. It is something that reveals itself when interference is removed. You start to notice things as they are, rather than as you interpret them to be. Situations that once felt complicated become simple. Decisions that once felt overwhelming become clear. This is because your perception is no longer clouded by excessive mental noise. Mental silence also sharpens your awareness of the present moment. Instead of being lost in thoughts about the past or future, you become fully engaged with what is happening now. You hear more clearly, you observe more deeply, and you respond with greater precision. There is no delay caused by overthinking, no distortion caused by unnecessary assumptions. What you perceive is direct and immediate. There is a subtle intelligence within silence that cannot be accessed through constant thinking. When the mind is quiet, insights arise naturally. You do not force them, and you do not chase them. They appear on their own, often in moments when you are simply present and attentive. This kind of understanding feels different. It is not constructed through effort, but discovered through stillness. As mental silence deepens, you also become aware of how much of your previous thinking was repetitive and unnecessary. The same worries, the same doubts, the same imagined scenarios playing again and again. You begin to see that much of this activity served no real purpose other than to create tension. With this awareness, you naturally stop engaging with these patterns as much as before. This does not mean that thinking loses its value. Thinking becomes more precise, more intentional. Instead of being constant and uncontrolled, it becomes a tool that you use when needed. When the situation requires analysis, you think clearly. When it does not, you remain in silence. This balance is what allows true clarity to exist. There is also a sense of ease that comes with mental silence. Without the constant pressure of thoughts, your body relaxes. Your breathing becomes steady. Your reactions slow down. You are no longer in a state of inner conflict, trying to manage or control everything that appears in your mind. There is a quiet stability that supports your awareness. In this stillness, perception becomes deeper. You begin to notice not only what is obvious, but also what lies beneath the surface. You sense intentions, patterns, and subtle changes that would otherwise go unnoticed. This is not because you are trying harder, but because there is nothing blocking your view. Clarity, then, is not something distant or difficult to achieve. It is already present, waiting beneath the layers of mental noise. When the mind becomes silent, even for brief moments, that clarity begins to show itself naturally and effortlessly. Seeing clearly is often romanticized as if greater awareness automatically leads to peace and ease. But what is rarely spoken about is the weight that comes with it. When you begin to see beyond surface level appearances, you also begin to recognize truths that are difficult to ignore. Awareness removes the comfort of illusion. And once those illusions are gone, you are left with responsibility. Before clarity, it is easy to blame. You can point at circumstances, at other people, at situations that seem unfair. You can justify your reactions, your habits, your decisions. There is always something outside of you to explain why things are the way they are. This creates a sense of temporary relief because it allows you to avoid looking deeper. But when your awareness sharpens, this pattern begins to break. You start to notice your own role in everything you experience. You see how your reactions shape outcomes, how your assumptions influence your perception, how your habits create repeating cycles in your life. This realization can be uncomfortable because it removes the distance between you and your actions. Responsibility does not mean blame. It means ownership. It is the understanding that while you may not control everything that happens around you, you are always responsible for how you respond. This shift is subtle but powerful. Instead of being a passive participant in your life, you become an active one. You stop waiting for things to change externally and begin to work on what is within your control. With deeper awareness, you also begin to see through the intentions of others more clearly. You recognize patterns in behavior, inconsistencies in words, and underlying motives that were previously hidden. This can change how you relate to people. You may find it harder to tolerate dishonesty, manipulation, or superficial interactions. What once seemed acceptable may no longer align with your understanding. This creates another layer of responsibility, the responsibility to act in alignment with what you see. It is not enough to recognize truth. You must also decide what to do with it. Sometimes this means setting boundaries. Sometimes it means stepping away from certain environments or relationships. Sometimes it means changing parts of yourself that you had grown comfortable with. These decisions are not always easy, but they become necessary when clarity is present. There is also a responsibility toward your own inner state. When you are unaware, it is easy to be carried away by emotions without question. Anger, fear, jealousy. These reactions feel automatic, almost justified. But when you can see them clearly as they arise, but you also see that you have a choice. You can either continue feeding these emotions or allow them to pass without acting on them. This choice brings accountability. You can no longer say, I had no control, because now you see the moment where control is possible. You notice the impulse before the reaction. You recognize the pattern before it fully takes over. And in that space, you are responsible for the direction you choose. As awareness deepens, even your internal excuses begin to lose their power. You become aware of the stories you tell yourself, the reasons you delay action, the justifications for staying in comfort, the fears that keep you from moving forward. These stories become visible, and once they are seen, they can no longer operate in the same hidden way. This can feel confronting because it removes the safety of ignorance. It asks more of you. It asks you to be honest, to be disciplined, to act with intention rather than impulse. But at the same time, it gives you something far greater: freedom. Not the kind of freedom that comes from doing whatever you want, but the kind that comes from not being controlled by unconscious patterns. Responsibility, in this sense, is not a burden placed upon you by something external. It is a natural result of seeing clearly. The more you see, the more you understand, and the more you understand, the more you are called to act in alignment with that understanding. You begin to move through life with greater precision. Your actions become more deliberate. Your words carry more weight. You are no longer reacting to everything around you without awareness. You are choosing your responses based on clarity. And in this way, awareness transforms not only how you see the world, but how you participate in it. Most people approach inner work with intensity, but not with consistency. They seek quick transformation, immediate clarity, instant results. For a few days, they are disciplined. They sit in silence. They observe their thoughts. They try to remain aware. But when the results are not immediate, their effort begins to fade. Slowly, they return to old habits, and the cycle repeats. What they fail to understand is that awareness is not something you switch on once and keep forever. It is something that must be cultivated, if refined, and maintained through continuous practice, just as the body becomes stronger through repeated training. The mind becomes clearer through repeated observation. Without consistency, whatever clarity you experience will be temporary. Each moment of awareness builds upon the previous one. Even if it feels small, even if it feels like nothing is changing, something is being developed beneath the surface. When you sit in stillness for a few minutes each day, when you observe your thoughts instead of reacting to them, and you are training your mind to operate differently, you are creating a new pattern, one that gradually replaces the old automatic responses. In the beginning, the changes are subtle. you may not notice a dramatic difference. Your mind may still feel busy, your reactions may still happen quickly, and you may question whether the practice is working at all. This is where most people stop. They mistake the absence of immediate results for failure. But transformation at this level does not happen suddenly. It unfolds slowly, layer by layer. Consistency requires patience. It requires you to continue even when there is no visible reward. It asks you to trust the process without needing constant proof. This is difficult because the mind is conditioned to seek results. It wants confirmation that the effort is worth it. But true awareness develops in a quieter way. It does not announce itself loudly. It reveals itself gradually. As you continue the practice, you begin to notice small shifts. A reaction that once happened instantly now has a slight pause before it. A thought that would have consumed your attention now passes more quickly. An emotion that once felt overwhelming now feels manageable. These changes may seem minor, but they are significant. They indicate that your awareness is growing. Over time, these small shifts accumulate. The pause becomes longer, the clarity becomes stronger, and your ability to remain present becomes more stable. What once required effort begins to feel more natural. You no longer have to remind yourself constantly to observe. Awareness starts to arise on its own. Consistency also deepens your understanding. Each time you observe your mind, you see something new. You recognize patterns you had not noticed before. You understand your reactions more clearly. This repeated observation builds a kind of familiarity with your inner world. You are no longer a stranger to your own thoughts and emotions. You begin to know them intimately. There will still be moments when you lose awareness. You will get caught in thoughts, react impulsively, or fall back into old patterns. This is part of the process. Consistency is not about being perfect. It is about returning again and again. Each time you notice that you have lost awareness and bring your attention back, you are strengthening the practice. This returning is what builds stability. It teaches you that awareness is always available. Even if it is temporarily forgotten, you do not need to start over each time. You simply continue from where you are. This removes the pressure to be flawless and replaces it with a steady commitment. As consistency becomes part of your daily life, awareness begins to extend beyond your practice sessions. It appears in ordinary moments. While you are speaking, while you are listening, while you are making decisions. You start to carry a sense of presence with you, regardless of the situation. This is when awareness becomes integrated, no longer something you do, but something you are. And through this steady, repeated effort, your inner vision becomes clearer, not through force or sudden breakthrough, but through quiet, disciplined persistence. In the end, there is no secret being hidden from you. There is only a path that most people are unwilling to walk, a path that requires silence in a world addicted to noise, awareness in a mind trained to react, and discipline in a life built on distraction. You searched for something extraordinary, something beyond the ordinary limits of perception. But what you discovered is far more powerful than any technique or method. You discovered that the ability to see clearly was always within you, waiting beneath the layers of noise, fear, and unconscious habit. The invisible was never truly invisible. It was simply covered by restless thoughts, covered by constant distraction, covered by the unwillingness to sit with yourself long enough to see what is real. Now you understand that clarity is not given to you. It is revealed when you remove what distorts it. And this removal does not happen once. It happens daily through stillness, through observation, through the courage to face discomfort, and through the responsibility of acting on what you see. There will be moments when you feel lost again. Moments when the noise returns, when old patterns resurface, when clarity seems distant. But now you know the way back, not through force, not through struggle, but through returning to awareness again and again. This is the discipline. This is the practice. This is the path. And as you continue walking it, something within you will become steady, unshaken by the chaos around you. You will begin to move through life with a quiet certainty, seeing not only what is shown, but what is hidden beneath. Not because you have gained a special power, but because you have finally learned how to see.